Welcome to Growing a Hashtag Worthy Ministry, How to Start a Social Justice Project and Love Like a Modern Day Jesus. My name is Selys Rivera and I'll be your workshop leader for today. So about me, my educational background, I do have a Bachelor of Arts in English Writing with a minor in Spanish, as well as a Master's of Social Work. And then I will be starting a certificate of pastoral ministry that I'm pretty excited about. As for career-wise, I thought I'd mention a couple of examples that relate to what we're talking about today. So the first is that I was a missionary with Disciples Volunteering for 2 years. The first summer, I was with Yakima Christian Mission, and they work on food and land justice. And then the second year, I was with Urban Spirit, and they work more with economic justice. I've also written for Just Women, which was a magazine and Bible study and is now just a Bible study that covers spiritual and social justice issues specifically relating to women. And I am a member of the board now as well. I currently do work as a social worker. However, I do also own my own small business called Worthery2 LLC. I offer freelance writing, editing services, as well as consulting to churches that would like to start a social justice project ministry and need a little extra help. And I do also have a blog as well with the same name. And then finally, as a resource, I thought I'd mention that I am the author of Social Justice Advocacy 101, How to Become a Social Justice Advocate from A to Z. Moving right along. So if you're here, I'm assuming that you've read the workshop description, but just in case, I thought I would cover it real quick. The Bible repeatedly shares stories of hope for the oppressed and societies that favor the privileged. Jesus himself consistently challenged the status quo and stood up for marginalized communities like the poor, the sick, the needy, the outcast, and the forgotten. As disciples of Christ, how can we follow in Jesus' footsteps in our current times and advocate for causes close to God's heart? Join this workshop to learn how to create a social justice project within your own church and transform your congregation's faith into action. So our syllabus for today, we'll be covering 4 specific steps. First, how to choose a cause inspired by Jesus' advocacy. Second, how to select the level of impact for that cause. Third, how to pick an advocacy method that matches that level of impact. Or how to put 4 days into action as a congregation.
And it was so hot, and I got really
first step, how to choose a cause inspired by Jesus' advocacy. What I did here was I found several scripture readings for you and your congregation to meditate on as you figure out what cause to do for your project. And with these scripture readings, I found examples of specific causes that Jesus advocated for within his ministry. So Jesus was in favor of diversity. To start, age, right? Both children as well as respecting parents, disability, the lame, and the blind. There's plenty of parables about that. Ethnicity, Samaritans, sorry, Gentiles, you name it, Israelites. Gender, there were female disciples that followed Jesus as well. Occupation, everybody knows about Matthew, right? The tax collector, the job that everybody hated. And then social class, poor will always be with you, inviting the poor to the table, to the feast, as well as disability, my apologies. And then just remember that in Disciples of Christ, within our mission, we serve all people, and we do also invite to the table for Thanksgiving. So keep that in mind. I also put here God's kingdom on earth. There are multiple ways to interpret that. Whether it's making earth look as close to heaven as we can. Jesus did more than just talk about how to get to heaven. Jesus was talking a lot about how to create the systemic change in their society based on God's values. And then I also put the oppressed and the persecuted. However, Jesus also challenged legal and religious authority. So we can talk about, giving Caesar what is Caesar's, taxes. We can also talk about, the Pharisees, the scribes, which I also went in here and mentioned religious hypocrisy and prejudice, right? And also challenging social and cultural norms. I mean, Jesus worked on the Sabbath, which was like a big deal, big no-no, right? So That being said, with all this, even though we are going to be advocating, something I want to point out that's very important, and I made it into a handy little quote here. Our goal is not to make a Christian society. It's to make progress towards an equitable and equal society because we're motivated by our Christian values. Okay? So even though ultimately, right, the whole goal, well, the final goal is, we want to save people. Of course we do. We want to save ourselves. And conversion, converting others to Christianity, that would be fantastic. But in this case, we are serving people to serve people because we're Christians, not because we're trying to make them or force them to be Christians in order to get help. Okay? So keep that in mind, right? They will see God, they will see Jesus through our actions. That's how we can represent that. But the goal of the ministry, the specific social justice ministry, is not conversion. It's to help whatever that cause is by ourselves being motivated through these Christian values. Okay? It's a little confusing, but hang in there. It'll make a little more sense as we move on. So now that we've meditated on Jesus' example, now we're going to be looking at issues today that kind of model and relate to what Jesus was working with during his time. So with diversity, so maybe your congregation is interested in working against discrimination. There's equitable access for disabilities, homelessness, which also can relate to hunger, immigration, mental health, poverty, unemployment benefits, which is really big right now with COVID, workers' rights, okay? I also mentioned here for God's kingdom on earth, as I mentioned, a couple examples. So environmentalism, right? Because heaven is this place we always picture luscious green and healthy nature and things like that. Equal and equitable treatment for all, right? Everybody being treated the same. And then health benefits, right? There's no pain in heaven, that sort of thing. So a couple examples there. And then for the oppressed and persecuted, so I've put here child abuse, domestic violence, gender equality, sexual violence, racial inequality, religious freedom for all, right? Because just because someone's in a different religion doesn't mean that they deserve to be harassed or anything like that. And I put women's rights as well. Now, please keep in mind, this list is not exhaustive in any way at all. There are plenty of other issues that are more controversial or less controversial that I didn't put in here. This is just to get brainstorming. Maybe something in here clicked and you and your congregation are totally going to go for it. Or maybe you want to study a little more scripture, want to talk a little more and figure something else out that I didn't put on here. That's cool. But what's important is that you're working with something that your congregation is going to be passionate about, because that passion is what's going to help you guys keep going, help you keep moving forward even when times are difficult. All right. All right, the next part, select the level of impact. In social work, we talk about 3 different levels: micro, meso, and macro. And I explained a little bit here. So micro is the smallest level. It's individuals or couples or small groups. The next step is meso. So that's more community, maybe your neighborhood, something more local, could be larger groups, and even organizations or institutions. Then macro is local government. So that could be your city, that could be your county, right? And you can go to your state, national, to your country, and then even global. Okay. So as you discuss the cause, right, you've picked your cause and you're discussing how you want to start working with that cause, working towards whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. Decide as a congregation where you want to start. You might want to start small, or you want to go big and go home. Whatever you decide, just make sure that you're all kind of going to put in the work, because it is a lot of work. Whatever you decide, it's going to be a lot of work. So you really need to make sure make sure you're passionate about it so that you'll continue to be motivated to work through. All right. So to pick an advocacy method, what I did was I based it on that level of impact. So at this point, your congregations picked a cause, you picked a level of impact you want to have. So I've listed some examples to get you thinking and brainstorming here. So if you're thinking micro level, perhaps you want to create a mentoring program to assist a vulnerable population. For example, you could match youth with elderly, and the youth can get some community service hours and they can help out the elderly. And then the elderly, maybe they can give some wisdom and advice to that youth, right? Maybe that youth, maybe their grandparents have passed away already, and that relationship can help them on both of them, in both sides mutually on an individual level. You might also want to offer affordable services. So perhaps, Christian counseling or something like that on a sliding scale fee where you can pay based on what your income is. You might also want to start a support group. So there's Alcoholics Anonymous. You could do a grief counseling group, or perhaps even like a cancer survivors group. That's plenty of options. If you're thinking more that middle ground, that meso level, some examples are attending a walk to raise awareness on an issue. So for example, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention has walks to raise money for suicide prevention. There's also Walk a Mile in Her Shoes that raises awareness for domestic violence. You can also maybe do like a breast cancer awareness walk, an autism awareness walk. There's plenty of options that you can research. You can have a social media campaign for a cause. That's pretty cool because it's easier to kind of do right now. For example, let's say for Mental Health Awareness Month, you need to take a picture of yourself with a quote that fights the stigma, maybe a fact or something that kind of debunks a myth about mental health. You can share it, you can invite other people to share it, and then, maybe you can create a hashtag or have them tag your social media account and kind of raise awareness that way. And then you can also partner with a local nonprofit to volunteer. The example I always think of here during Hurricane Maria, even though Feeding America is a pretty big, big company, big organization, I should say, the local chapter, what they were doing is that they were making like boxes of lunches, food to send to Puerto Rico. And so that was something that is just an example of what you can do with partnering with an organization to volunteer. And then finally, macro, okay? So with macro, government. So you can call or do a phone call or writing campaign where everyone agrees to reach out at a certain period of time or for that specific issue. Or maybe you could write a letter together as a congregation, each sign it. It's kind of like a petition. Well, not exactly, but that's a whole other issue. But you can research that if you're interested in doing a petition. I'm not super versed on it other than signing it. You also might want to meet a government official as well, which you can do by reaching out and sometimes maybe even if the representative themselves is not available, there's like a legislative aide that you can meet. So that's one thing. It's kind of one of the more exciting parts of advocacy. So definitely take pictures if you get to do that. You might want to join a protest. And then finally, raising funds and donating to a global organization. So a global organization like UNICEF or a refugees organization that's global. Something that maybe you want to do like a fundraising or crowdfunding. There's like a Christian crowdfunding platforms, like I think it's called Fundly. But you might also want to do something even within your own congregation. Maybe one Sunday for a specific month, you just decide, okay, on this date, all offerings are going to go to this cause. Or maybe you decide for a month that every Sunday a certain percentage of tithes will go towards that, okay? Or even, let's say, if you're pairing it with a social media cause, you can include a link to donate online and encourage other people to do that. A couple different little options that way. So at this point, right, so we've got our cause, we've picked the level of impact, we picked our method of advocacy. Now it's time to put faith into action, all right? We got to get to work. Now, you definitely need to be assigning roles of who's going to do what and hold any necessary meetings. When you're doing that, you're going to create an action plan and outline the steps of what it is that you're trying to accomplish with this project, all right? You do need to figure out finances. It's not just like raising funds for a global organization, like I mentioned, that might be your ultimate goal, so definitely have to do that. But for example, if you need to buy any materials or anything like that, that's something important to know, which is why I put that as the next bullet point to prepare and acquire materials. So for example, let's say for a walk, you all want to wear matching t-shirts with your church and maybe a slogan to raise awareness that you are getting involved, getting outside of your church. That's cool. And you can take pictures and you can share on social media, and that's fine. So that's something maybe everybody's going to pay for their own shirts, or maybe the church will cover a certain percentage. So those are the sort of details that you need to figure out. You do need to also attend trainings if they're applicable. So for example, if you're going to be doing Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, they have a very, very like step-by-step program that's very detailed, right? It's very big, so you're definitely going to need to make sure that you're following their program steps if you're going to be aligning yourself to that specific term of Alcoholics Anonymous. Otherwise, you're going to be really struggling with copyright issues. All right, so you also want to coordinate dates and times, make sure everybody's on the same page. And then no matter what you do, whether it's a social media campaign or not, you're kind of going to do a social media campaign almost for anything, but you want to at least promote and share social media on the day of the event if you're not going to be doing a whole big campaign for like a week or a month. You know, so if you do go to the walk and you're all wearing the same t-shirt, take pictures. If you do meet with a government official, take a picture. If you do a fundraising campaign, crowdfunding online, or maybe, well, you can't really take a picture of that, but you can find a picture, you can take a picture, something relating, and then, you know, share the link, or at least just share the link, okay? But always a call to action. That means you want whoever sees the post to engage with the post. You don't want them to just see it, oh, that's nice, and scroll by. No, you want them to like, you invite them to like it, or invite them to share, raise awareness, or invite them to donate in that link, okay? Or to like your page, follow you, so you can see what else you might be getting into in terms of other projects, invite them to your church, that sort of thing. All right, so keep in mind, okay? We're going to be working towards systemic change that will last, not just charity. So some of the things I've mentioned are kind of a little more on the charity side, right? So the thing to keep in mind is that example of give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach a man a fish, you feed him for a lifetime, all right? When I was in Disciples volunteering, we joked about creating a system where everybody has access to the same body of water, equal access, everybody can get, you know, be able to provide themselves with their own fish, right? So that's kind of what we're doing, right? The different levels. So if you're doing something like a food pantry, yes, that's going to help whoever comes not be hungry that night. Awesome. But maybe you should also be advocating for something bigger, whether it's something that could relate to that. You know, maybe food stamps is not something you're interested in, or maybe it's something like raising the minimum wage so you can't afford food. There's multiple options, but that's just an example so you can kind of understand what I'm going with. Charity is part of the part of the project, right? But ultimately, you want to create systemic change. Where with social work, we always joke that we're the profession that's trying to get ourselves out of a job. We're trying to make the world a better place so that they don't really need social workers. So think of it kind of like that. All right, really important, getting serious right now. COVID-19 safety precautions. This is super big. Some of the things I've mentioned here really usually are done out and about and with large groups and stuff. So you've got to keep that in mind as you're deciding things. The biggest thing, if you're going to be going to a protest right now, I understand it's dangerous. All right, so you need to keep that in mind. But if you do decide, it's not necessarily something that I'm promoting or saying everybody needs to do, but if you do make that decision, if someone from your congregation makes that decision, or if you all do, all right, do follow the precautions. Maybe stay on the outskirts of the group so you can stay 6 feet away. Wear your masks, bring sanitizer, all that sort of stuff. If you're going to be holding necessary meetings even within yourselves, maybe it's better to just do it over video conference. Social media campaigns, pretty easy to be doing this. Everybody could take pictures even from home, send it to whoever it is that's going to be posting it, or everybody could post individually and just use the hashtag that you created, tag the church, that sort of thing. Even actually, there are virtual walks where you can pledge how many miles you're going to do, and you walk the miles on your own, and then you're inputting it there into that website, to that whatever that project is, or that organization that you're aligning yourself with. So there are plenty of options. Just know that you don't necessarily have to do things to put yourself at risk. I know it's a really big deal with COVID and everything else going on right now. So just please know that you're allowed to take care of yourself. And we'll go into that. Now, important laws real quick before I go into safety. There are important laws that you're going to want to keep in mind. I'm not necessarily going to detail too much about those because it depends on what you're doing. But for example, if you're going to be doing a mental health thing like Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a law called HIPAA. For those of you who don't know, that's about confidentiality for health and private health information. So for that, you need to make sure that you're following that law and that you are protecting the health information of whoever's attending that group. or if you want to do a counseling program, make sure that the counselor or therapist is licensed. Make sure you're following whatever laws you need to follow for that, especially if you're going to get to the point where you're making like accepting health insurance or something. But that's like, if you wanted to create a nonprofit, hey, like that's all you, but that's beyond my pay grade. Other than that, if you go to a protest, it's very real. You can get arrested. There are issues like that. That happens. So you need to know your rights, all right? Keep that in mind. It's all stuff that you can research. I don't have necessarily the time to go into all those details, but I wanted to make sure I at least touched on that so that you can see this really is serious work. You know, Jesus, there's a reason Jesus was crucified, right? It's more than just, of course, right, saving humanity, and we talk about, right, you know, being cleansed of our sins, but not just that. It's just that it's very important to know that Jesus was like upheaving the world around him. People don't like change, but change, the only constant is change. So and we're trying to work towards good change. Okay, so keep that in mind. Finally, safety of yourself, your congregants, and vulnerable populations that you're working with. If it's more dangerous to bring vulnerable populations to come together, right, to your, you know, maybe like, for example, cancer survivors, someone who had cancer, that's definitely someone who's much more vulnerable to COVID. Maybe you want to host those support groups over webcam. That could be an option. Like I mentioned, maybe your congregation doesn't feel safe having, you know, coming together to do stuff. Maybe you prefer to do everything on social media. That's fine. Get started there and just, you know, do something. Everybody needs to do something, do our part, and ultimately together we'll be doing this work as a church with a big C. But most importantly, yourself. You must practice self-care. Don't forget that. Avoid burnout. This is really exhausting work emotionally. And those of you who are clergy or youth leaders or any kind of leadership position could definitely, are probably already used to this burnout feeling. I don't want you to be burning out. I want you to be able to take care of yourself so you can continue to do this work and move forward, which is why I gave you another handy little quote here. Practicing self-care is one of the most selfless things you can do, because you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't take care of someone else if you can't take care of yourself. Okay? All right, so as we're coming to an end here, if you want to learn more, I did mention my book earlier. My book does go into details more about how to advocate, things like steps on how to set up government official meetings, phone scripts for those phone calls I mentioned, writing templates for emails and letters. There's also sorts of advice introducing you to things like town halls, if you do go to a protest, like what you need to do to prepare to go to that, although this was pre-COVID, but keep in mind what I mentioned about COVID, all that sort of thing. There are resources too, so videos to watch, apps you can download, articles to read. So if you're interested, definitely more than that, I then would invite you to go to Amazon and check it out. I think there is a print book and an ebook option. And then I do have a blog. Like I said, for my business worth a read too, my slogan is because we all have a story worth telling. And so it's a progressive Christian and social justice blog and my website there. So I have more about me and links to my social media and things like that, although I'll give that in the next slide. So if you're interested, definitely check out that website. Stay in touch. You can email me. It's my name at my business, Selys Rivera at wortharead2.com. You can also follow me at Selys Rivera, like I mentioned, my social media. I am on Facebook, Goodreads, Instagram, and Twitter. And then finally, a link that's, I believe, at the bottom of my website and also in the drop down. Well, it's not drop down, but the side that links to all the different parts and external parts of the site. So you can subscribe to the newsletter. Again, the website, www.wortharead2.com. I don't think I read it earlier. But with my newsletter, I will let you know about new blog posts that go out and any new books I publish. But I'm also interested in starting up like products and courses and relating to this sort of thing and more, and also my other writing. So if you're interested in finding out when that happens, being the first person to know whenever I do give out promotions or anything like that, please subscribe to my newsletter. I promise not to bother you too much. I try to keep it to once a week. Sometimes I even forget a week. So I hope that you'll stay in touch. And thank you so much for coming to my workshop today, my virtual workshop. And other than that, see you later. Thanks. Stay safe.
All right, I guess I can unmute myself now. All right, can you guys hear me? Yes. All right, thank you. You guys were all asking really great questions throughout. I'm gonna try to start answering them in case some of you weren't reading the chat. So to start, I was asked if the slides are available. If you'd like a copy of the slides, I also created a digital workbook, going throughout the steps. So if you're interested in that, you can email me. My email, again, is Selys Rivera at worth32.com. I'll share it again in the chat. And any other more questions or anything else, you can also email me. Email's like the quickest way to get in touch with me. So we can do that. What was the next question after that? So I was asked about the book. I did, by Dawn, I did talk a little bit about it at the end there. Did you have more questions? Dawn is still here. Maybe not. I guess not. I looked it up, it looks great. Okay. All right, so never mind. Okay, so yeah, so my book is available if anyone's interested in that. Let's see, what was the other one? All right, so Lana asked, okay, so because of COVID, trying to do more macro level, oh, I'm sorry, looks like she said meso level projects are a little more difficult to do. And that's like what I mentioned, when you're trying to do stuff in your local community, things like walks and stuff like that. So we're getting creative. We really have to get creative right now. I did mention, the virtual walks, but thankfully, all sorts of new things are coming up as we go along. I've been look at the fact that we're doing this conference like this. It's just a proof. And if anybody ever has any other options or ideas, like feel free to share. But there's a lot more that we can do virtually than we think we can. It's just about getting creative. Definitely worth trying out things like social media campaigns or things like doing like support groups virtually. I think you could probably set up a government official meeting over Zoom because you can do phone campaigns and things like that. But when you call, you don't necessarily talk to the government official. But if you go to government official like websites, and then you can get their email, or you can write them a letter or something requesting a meeting, and usually an aide will get back to you, and you can just say that you want to set up something virtual like a Zoom meeting and see if they're cool with it. It really depends if the government official themselves is more tech savvy or not. I actually mentioned in my book, the book was pre-COVID when I wrote it, but one of the things I mentioned when I was talking about that is like if you're going to choose between sending a letter that's either like physical or sending an email, for example, it really depends on the government official. I have a friend who interned at a government official office, and her government official is super like hip, I guess I should say, hip and happening, that's how I say. So she preferred emails. Any letters that arrived physically would just go in the trash. Nobody would look at them. That's what she did. However, the government official down the hall at the Capitol was an older gentleman, and apparently they never checked the emails, but they looked at the letters. So it's just about knowing what works best. You can always call and ask, or tweet. Honestly, government officials usually get back to you a lot faster on social media. I've connected more that way. So there are those options. And if we need to start micro or macro or something because of COVID, it's not to say that you can't do the other ideas later. It's just prioritizing. Like I mentioned, you can start in one and then go to the others. So hopefully that answers Lana's questions. And then after that, the next question. Okay, so Donna asked what to say to church folks who say that this is just too political. I have gotten asked that a lot. What I say to that is that we're not ever going to be specifically like pushing a political candidate. This is not about any specific political party or and that's why, the separation of church and state and stuff. So I'm not saying that this is to be necessarily saying, okay, well, this one politician is going to be the answer to everything or whatever, because we can't necessarily idolize, or we shouldn't be idolizing any government official or anybody in like in real life. But in terms of the issues, Lana, you pointed out Jesus was political in the book of Matthew, like true. So yes, I guess it just depends on how you define political and really what you mean by that. But what I just always answer is we're caring about the issues, and it has the issues, regardless of the partisanship, it's the issues. And that's why I like to base it off, okay, well, what did Jesus do in his ministry? Let's model off of that, and make sure that we're, again, attacking these issues because we ourselves are Christians, not because we're trying to like make this a quote unquote Christian political system, because that's not necessarily what we're doing. So that's what I say when I've been asked that. Hopefully that helps answer that question. But from what I understand, and if anything we've learned through all this, is that church is not within four walls. Church is a lot more work in the community than we think. Jesus didn't have four walls in a church. So any other questions after that?
Yeah. Do you want to come and be part of my congregation? Because I would love to have you.
I appreciate that.
I would love to have your voice. That would be wonderful.
Thank you.
Mama might have something to say about that.
Yeah, I was going to just take out the microphone. No, but she has permission to help everyone.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. It's nice it's nice that you're willing to share, Selena.
Thanks, Donna. So that's one of the reasons why I was really interested in doing this workshop, and I'd like to get into consulting churches who want to do social justice ministries. I feel like that's one like part of my calling. So I appreciate that.
Well, I will say I greatly appreciate the way you started the workshop. And maybe it's just from my perspective, it seemed non-threatening. And I think what's happening right now in our world is that with everything being so politicized, wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, whether you eat in a restaurant or have take the food out, all of that seems to be politicized these days. So then when you're talking about issues about whether you're going to, help or support immigrants or do really any of the things that you were talking about as possible kinds of things, what I have found is that my congregation was much more willing to do the Band-Aid kinds of things than they were to get in. That to them was not as political. But when you start talking about doing things so that you don't have to feed people anymore, that they can feed themselves, that's where I get challenged, that's political, and that's going beyond the bounds of what Jesus told us to do. I don't think that's true. I'm just saying that's the response I'm getting.
Gotcha. That definitely does. You're definitely gonna probably need to meditate some more on kind of like what approach to take. I think with social work, I just learned a lot more about like, it's all about how you approach a certain issue, and how you talk about it. Like you mentioned, I'm trying to portray this thing in a non-threatening way. I think the term social justice has a lot of baggage with it. And so one of the things, for example, social justice advocate versus warrior, the social justice warrior is more like the stereotype of someone like talking over someone else and just radically and just like pushing things in their face and, and like making extreme claims that don't necessarily like make any sense, in my opinion, versus social justice advocate is more like equality. So for example, I'm just going to use feminism since I'm a woman. So a social justice advocate, and saying like, okay, well, if I believe in feminism, I believe men and women are equal. And then a social justice warrior might be someone so extreme that it's like, women are better than men and we need a matriarchal society, and then like guys should like go to hell, which is like an exact like extreme thing that I would never say and I don't believe, and I hope it's okay that I said that, but those are kind of like the extremes. So it's very, I understand this is a very delicate issue, and being able to do this with your congregations, I know it's going to take, with each individual like of your congregations, it's going to take a different approach. You guys know it's like when you know your own family best. So Donna, I'm happy to help talk further later, because that might take a little more thinking and explaining and honest and just education too. So when your congregation says it's political, what do they mean? Or what do they mean by political? What does political mean to them?
Well, and I think, I've been in this congregation for 18 years. And so I think some of it has been a little bit surprising to me that the responses that I have gotten, you say, like you saying, you think you know your family. And just some of the responses to things that have happened recently over what people considered too political. I think it has to do with a whole lot of things. I think it has to do with isolation from COVID. I think it has to do with the social unrest that's happening. I think it has to do with people being very uncomfortable and needing something that they can control right now when they don't feel like they can control anything else. But it just, I don't know, it's just all very interesting to think about why it is the way it is. But I do greatly appreciate what you did here today. It was wonderful.
Thank you. And that's a good point too. I think with everything going on, especially this year, it's like it's been brought to our attention kind of like where our strengths are, where our weaknesses are, and like what our real fears are, because like when you feel threatened, like your safety and everything, it's like, yes, the ugly side can come out, but I've also been really inspired by things like this, like seeing how people can come together. So it's, let's, give your congregation the benefit of the doubt and understand, like you've been doing, and understanding like, okay, you just got to find a way to get past this like initial shock of like, no, that's too political, oh my gosh, like COVID's like whatever. I don't want to like get into that. Let's stick with what we know. Like I said, change is scary. Sometimes you have to take baby steps. Some people are just like ready to, I'm a millennial and we just want to like upheave everything, but I have this conversation all the time in my church because I know not everybody's ready for that. So happy to talk more later, Donna. There's more.
May I just say something? Just because somebody's not ready for something doesn't mean that it's the wrong thing to do. And part of what Jesus asks us to do is to pull people along into an area of discomfort, because that's really the only way society will ever change. So I understand the issues that we all deal with in our congregations and wanting to sort of lovingly bring everybody along, but also it's really not a question of politics. If you think taking care of everybody, making sure that everybody is healthy and educated, if you think that's political, I would ask you to think about that in a different way and think about it instead from the health of our society. And just from a purely moral point of view, what is the right thing to do? Take politics out of it. I don't care what you call yourself, but if you call yourself a Christian, then you should be coming down on the side of equal justice, equal healthcare, and equal education for all human beings, no exceptions.
Yep. Thank you, Michael.
I agree also. My name is Mary Franklin from Unity Christian Church. One of the things that I sort of like sneaked in with the congregation was conscious voting, whereas they had the opportunity to do the right thing if they were not registered to vote, and to update forms if they needed to do so. It wasn't pushing a political candidate, but it was letting you know that when you vote, you're not only voting for yourself, that you're voting for others too. One of the things I would like to see where I attend church is that we do come a little bit more conscious of things. And we have had a lot of Sunday school lessons on justice, but we to put it into action and just not talk about that.
Right. Right. And I appreciate you sharing that, Mary, because that brings up, like, with consciousness, it's getting the congregation, getting to think outside yourself. That's one of the things I think that's happened a lot with COVID, where it's like, well, I'm not at risk. Like, why do I need to do these things, or something like that? And yes, everybody gets to make their own choices individually. I would just ask, when people make the decisions on how to protect themselves, that they're keeping into account the people that they love, or the people who the people they love. So great point to point that out, Mary. And Susanna mentioned here, it looks like Justice Ministry that they've got going on, but the energy has waned. To help the congregation connect again with the issues, if anything, more than likely, I mean, we'd have to talk more, Susanna, but it sounds like maybe they're burnout. Like I was mentioning, you might need to do some self-care even within your own congregation. My congregation, we've done a couple like health fairs or self-care days, or, you know, and even if it's just getting together everybody to talk outside of church and like catch up and see how you're doing, or, you know, and do like a board game night. Even like, I did that on my birthday. I brought my friends together. We just played like games on Zoom, and that was a lot of fun. So, you know, if they start taking care of themselves again, once, you know, like there's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like once you've got your basic needs met, then you can start thinking more into those further, more existential like causes and crises and things like that. That's what I would encourage right now. Melissa mentioned it's hard to be a social justice advocate, the challenge to be a social justice advocate when people hear you as a social justice warrior. And I agree. Again, the education for sure is important. But it sounds like you guys have a lot going on. That's a lot of you already have things that you're doing, which is great. And that's why I'm so proud to be part of this denomination. Because that's, you know, it's at our heart, the core, our heart is mission. So that's awesome. Justice is a character of God. Let's see. Yep, spiritually pivotal. And sharing resources here for sure. Awesome. Anybody else have any other quick questions?
I have been inspired tremendously because you used the word hip. So now I know I can speak the language once again. But other than that, sometimes the best social justice you can do, I think, is not doing some things. And by that, I mean not supporting. I had a whole bunch of folks that were supporting like wounded warriors. Now, I'm not against soldiers, of course, because I am one. But, you know, when you have like $5 to $6 to $7 go to administration. And so I said, that's not a good use of your money. Why don't you take it to Week of Compassion? There we have 2 people. So you can approach it financially, and if you do it and start there, then you can build on that and say, wow, that was a great impact that you made on justice or on helping or on outreach or whatever it might be.
Yeah, thank you, Ellen, for sharing that. And I think that that brings up the point of just like, look at the resources you already have in your congregation, and look back to see what you've already done. You know, when I was preparing this and I was thinking of the stuff that my church has done, I look back and I'm like, wow, like, you know, we've done more than I thought. Like once you culminate together, there's a saying, a social work supervisor of mine gave me a picture when I like finished the internship and graduated, and it's a story of the man walking, there's a man on the beach and he's throwing like 1 starfish at a time into the ocean. For those of you who haven't heard this, but then somebody else comes up and it's like, well, why are you doing that? Like, that's a waste of time. Like, it's taking you so long one by one. It doesn't really make a difference. And the guy with the starfish is like, well, it makes a difference to this one. And then he throws it back into the ocean. So, you know, it's like little changes, little bit by bit. We got to start where we can. Social work there's a social work tendency. Same with, and this I would mention to Donna and those of you worried about your congregations and where they're at, is meet the client, meet your congregation and where they're at, start there, and then move your way towards where you want to be, as opposed to like, oh, well, this is where we should be. Like, let's just get there as fast as we can. That's not necessarily what's going to do that. And then always, and this is just social working this a lot, but validating emotions first. Like, people need to have that sense of crisis or that sense of chaos. Like, people are not going to logically think or understand or really hear unless their emotions are down. So when they are getting that heated, you're having these conversations, you know, conflict resolution, de-escalate, even if it's just like, hey guys, let's take a breather, a break, whatever, and then you can continue the conversation further. And then hopefully, you know, once people have their emotions a little lower, then they should be able to hear what's really being said and understand it more.
The website that I posted, the DART website that I posted in the chat, is actually something that our congregation is looking into. The affiliate in the Tampa Bay area is called FAST, Faith and Action with Strength Together. And what I am intrigued with about it is, instead of going out and doing a food pantry or doing a protest or doing a walk, they actually research different social justice issues in the community. And they choose from that research and from their gathering of information, they choose a few to work on for that year. And then they research the issues more on how they can go about making policy changes. And then they meet with public officials, whoever that public official might be for that area, whether it's a school board or city council or county commission, and they work with them to make systemic policy changes. So Palmlick's been researching that, and we're hoping to join them for the next year, 2021. It's all congregation based.
Awesome, Andrea. Thanks for sharing that. I'm definitely going to check it out. I already made sure to save the link here. That's cool. I appreciate it. Okay. Yeah, this work, it continues despite whoever's in, doesn't matter what political parties in, you know, in charge or anything, or what the majority is or anything, like, you know, being well researched. We're gonna do this work regardless of, you know, what's going on, regardless of what's going on. But that's a great resource, and definitely. I mean, education. Do your homework before you you sit down to have that conversation with your congregations. And I highly encourage, even if it's just doing a Bible study on these, you know, these kinds of topics. See, that's a good way to see kind of where everybody's at and how they feel and what the takeaways are. You know, with these issues or with these scripture readings. And again, like I mentioned, you can email me if you want the slides or the digital workbook or the digital workbook. So that you can start doing that. Anybody else? This is a great conversation.
I will say we're trying to preserve the chats in each of these sessions so that we can have that information if you missed it for future. So
thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes, Selys, I have something to share if I can. Mm-hmm. This is Warren Clark up in St. Augustine at the United Church, where UCC and Disciples combine, and I'm a Disciples in background, growing up in Riverside Church in Jacksonville. A couple of things that have really worked for us that helped us pull together a vital social justice ministry here are that we started off with studies, sacred conversations on ending structural racism, and those were open to the public, so there were people that were from other congregations that also participated in that. And our pastor led that, Donna Cooney. And then we also did a racial wealth gap simulation that was done through Bread for the World. They have done like this simulation with well over 1.5 million people in the United States. It's amazing. And for me, I thought that I knew a fair amount about it. And I found out that really the racial wealth gap is a creation of a whole string of public policies all the way back to the Civil War and right through to the CARES Act. It happened again. And so that really was eye-opening for us. And it catalyzed us into, so then what do we do? And then Black Lives Matter started. And then that had us, because we'd done the study, because we had done that gap simulation, it had us want to actually be in front of our congregation. And we started doing that probably 3 or 4 months ago. And pretty consistently now, every weekend, I think today was the 16th one or so, we have been out there with signs and banners and everything, and on US 1 in front of our congregation. And we have become a ministry of presence as you enter into St. Augustine. So it was small, but it's like one step leads to another, leads to another. And by doing it this way, there's a whole group of people now that this is the way that they get together for church, because we can't get together physically. So this has become our church gathering. And it's not the pastor doing it. It's not one or two people in the church pushing it and they're the social activists, but rather there's a whole group of us. And this has become vital to the ministry and really to the identity of the congregation. So, but it's a step, it's a organic flow almost is the way it worked. Begins with study, and then it Bible study or whatever it is, and then forming a group, and then events happen, and it just begins to emerge in response to that.
Thank you, Warren. I appreciate it. And what was that organization you said that did the?
It's Bread for the World. It's a Christian lobby group on hunger. It is excellent. And in terms of actually doing advocacy, what I found was that if you start with something like hunger that you're going to advocate about, well, hello, it's a little bit tough, even for the apolitical people, to say, no, we don't care about hungry people in this country or the world. And so that's a good step out, maybe with an offering a letter twice a year through Bread for the World, a step into advocacy beyond just a charitable giveaway, which is okay to do.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I'll definitely check it out. And yeah, it's not just, this isn't to knock charity, like that we shouldn't do it. One of the things I've learned, because when I was at Urban Spirit, we were working economic justice, we actually did a poverty simulation as well. It wasn't specifically focused on that racial wealth gap, which I think is fascinating and really important work to do. But from there, you know, we were talking about systemic change, and I was thinking about how, like, well, yeah, I mean, you still need to give the man a fish while he's learning to fish, and while you're getting the the body of water ready for everybody, you know, getting everybody access to that body of water to fish. So it's not that you can't do charity or you shouldn't do charity. It's just that don't stop there. Like Donna was mentioning, you know, the Band-Aid solution. It's like, you know, the Band-Aid's not meant to cure like forever, right? Like a whole the whole, like, whatever that wound is, that's just like a temporary placeholder. But yeah, you know, unfortunately, if all you're doing is covering up with Band-Aids, eventually, and you're not taking care of the wound, there can be an infection, which I think is, you know, what we're always fighting in society. But it's very inspiring for me to see so many people here and everybody like brainstorming and sharing with their own congregation. So I appreciate that. Anybody else? This is great stuff.
I would like to share something. When Selys was preparing all this, one of the things that you may think is that you're not doing anything or you're doing too little. And we began trying to do like a list of things that Nueva Comunidad has been doing. And being a new congregation, a congregation information, we just gonna be, we actually, our birthday was 2 days ago, 3 years that we've been as a community of faith. Thank you. So we had a list of things. We have done several different things. We had joined Ocoee Christian Church in some efforts. Other we have done by ourselves, and it's just a working process. You begin someplace. What Warren was saying, educating is certainly one of the best places to begin and continue. And like Sally was mentioning, is to know your congregation. I think is vital, because some people would think it's too political. Some people with the study would change their minds, and the process will continue where we do what we have to do. We have to bring the kingdom of God here on earth while we are getting there to the kingdom of God. So that would be the best way I would describe it. And I thank you all for being here. And Selys, very proud mom. Good job, girl.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And very true. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think some of you, especially, you know, like Warren, we were sharing, some of you and Mary, you're already doing these steps. I hope that there's still something that you could glean from this, but you know, you're all doing amazing work. So proud of you.
You have to speak and act. You have to speak it and act on it and divine. You might be doing some things that you haven't realized it was social justice, such as Thanksgiving, giving meals, doing things like that, or going to a nursing home. So you just have to actually decide which way that you want to go with your action plan.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we have a food pantry here, and we would get bogged down in the what are the other ways we can help, and we finally said, okay, you get pulled away, and then energy wanes, and people get distracted, and so it's like you have to say, what are we going to focus on? We can't do it all, but we can do something, and so this is what we're going to focus on. Doesn't mean you can't learn about other issues or, you know, study other issues, but, you know, your focus can't be poured out into every single area, because you're just going to lose it. So.
Okay. I appreciate you sharing that, Alice. Actually, in my book, at the beginning, I do like a brief overview of kind of like how the U.S. government works, and I go into like how to, when you're picking your cause, just like asking yourself, you know, like 5 years from now, is this going to matter to me? You know, we talk about that a lot in social work, and like anxiety to help you like calm down. It's like, okay, this is going to matter 5 years from now, that, you know, I did this, like, okay, maybe not, it's just embarrassing. Okay, so it's the same thing, like, you know, 5 years from now, are you going to kick yourself in the butt because you didn't act on this issue, that you weren't part of the solution, that you were, you know, part of the problem? If you feel like, yes, you are going to kick yourself in the butt, then maybe that's something that you really care about and that you should be working on. I think the example I give is like, you know, for example, wanting to advocate for more federal funding for college students. So I was like, okay, so, you know, maybe it's like, okay, well, yeah, 5 years from now, this is going to matter to me because I have kids who are going to go into college, or, you know, like things like that. Then it's like, okay, well then, yeah, this is something that I am going to focus on. So what you can do is you can do like maybe like a list of all the things that all the issues everybody can brainstorm, and then you can prioritize what are our top 5. You know, you can vote on a couple, see kind of what where your identity is. Like I like what Warren, you were saying, you know, your identity as a congregation, being a ministry of presence. So you can kind of narrow down that way, and then you can do you know, I believe, I know, like for example, Just Women, there'll be like a different focus each year with the Bible study. You know, 1 year it could be mental health, or 1 year it could be I think it was like I don't remember if it was like sexual violence or wellness and like in your sexual well-being or something like that. So different things like that. So you can do that. You can be like, okay, well, this year we're going to focus all our projects on, you know, maybe you really care about, you know, like we were talking, what are the things we've mentioned, you know, racial equality or hunger, or, you know, maybe you can narrow it down. It's like, okay, well then let's focus this year on this and the other one, or maybe we'll do half a year on this and then the other half, or we'll do every other project. Like you can come up with so many different ways to do this, and depending on how big your congregation is, you might have the manpower to do multiple projects. Just depends. I come from a really small congregation, so we're not doing like 20 projects at the same time, but if you can handle that, like, you go for it. The point is that it's sustainable.
Yep.
Yes, intersectionality, Steve, so true. That's a term a lot of people are learning about now. Everything's interconnected. And true, yep, what's important for a congregation may change. And the identity of your congregation will change as people come and go. You know. But yeah, no, you can't make everybody happy. That's not the goal either. Any last questions? I think we're coming up at the 3 o'clock mark. Yep.
Right.
Green chalice. Okay, cool. All right, well, thank you all. Please email me, reach out to me on social media, whatever I can do to help you. You know, we'll chat. I'm happy to help.
Thank you so much, Selys, for your time and your terrific presentation and all your preparation and all your involvement throughout the weekend. It's really been a blessing to learn from you. Just great stuff. Terrific conversation here too, folks. I hope you all will take a quick break and refresh yourselves and get another glass of water. I think I'm on my 200th for the day as we head into our 3:15 sessions. And then don't forget worship at 4:30. We'll see you all in just a few moments. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thanks. Take care. Stay safe, everyone.